Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Colleen Lacoste. I am the Director of Certification and Business Development here at Webeck East. Webeck East provides startup and growth support services for entrepreneurs at any stage, as well as the famous WeBank certification. And today I am excited that we are going to be talking about the DBE, which is a different certification that you'll learn all about with our guest speaker today and the exciting and important changes that are going into effect this month. So just some housekeeping for the session. There are going to be a lot of people on today, so please ensure that you keep yourself on mute. And you are welcome to use the chat function to put in any questions. We'll keep an eye on them as we go throughout, and then Danielle is going to be addressing any questions that we have not yet covered towards the end of the program. So it is now my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Danielle Dietrich. She is a current partner at the Potomac Law Group. A large portion of her practice focuses on the representation of small, disadvantaged, disabled, minority, women, veteran, and LGBT-owned businesses. She helps small businesses identify and resolve legal needs as they arise, such as contract matters, intellectual property issues, collections, employment issues, and corporate governance and growth. A large portion of that work does involve assisting small businesses in obtaining and maintaining diversity certifications. So if you are looking for a legal consultant or someone that can really help you out, Danielle is a wonderful subject matter expert. So that being said, I am going to pass the program over to Danielle. Thanks so much, Danielle.
Thank you so much, Colleen, and thank you so much, Webeck East, for allowing me to speak today. And thank you all for attending. I see a lot of familiar faces out there, so hello. I know I've got a lot of clients and friends that have attended today. But just to give you a little bit of introduction about myself. In addition, I've been practicing law for about 19 years. And DBE work, I've probably been doing for about half of that. And I advise clients throughout the country, really, because it is a federal certification. I can do that on the DBE regulations. And whether that is, when they are applying or if they're going through a decertification or have any other issues, it's sort of runs the gamut. I get involved. My law firm, I just moved recently to Potomac Law Group. Some of you may have seen me before associated with other firms. I just made that move in March to be able to access a bigger platform. I now have attorneys in about 25 states that I can count on to help me with various issues. And it's an entirely remote platform, which is really exciting as a mom of two young teenagers. So thank you all for joining today. And, the DBE work, it's my passion. I do other work, I do litigation, I do outside general counsel type work, but I really enjoy working with women business owners to help them get certifications, to help them grow their businesses. So today is really exciting. And it's actually exciting that today is actually the day that all of this goes into effect. So today is the effective date of the new DBE regulations that we are going to talk about today. So it's the timing, it's happened to work out that. So first, one of the things I wanted to do was talk about what is the DBE program. And I know that the folks from Webeck East get asked this all the time. What is the difference between DBE and WBE? Are they the same? Are they different? Well, the first thing I want to talk about is the acronyms. So DBE stands for Disadvantaged Business Enterprise. And there's also an ACDBE that is specific to airport concessions. I'm just going to use the letters DBE throughout today's presentation, but everything really applies to both. They're separate certifications, but they have the same sorts of rules associated with them. So the DBE program is, first of all, it's for small businesses. So the business has to meet the SBA size standards for its NAICS code, and it has to be for profit. And so you take your NAICS code and you look in the SBA table and see if you count as small. In addition, the DBE program has its own ceiling of 30.72 million for gross revenue. And that tends to be lower than some of the SBA size maximums. And the company has to be at least 51% owned by a socially and economically disadvantaged owner. And so we also have a new acronym, SEDO, CEDO, that is part of the new rules and is being used. So that's a new term to use. Now, where this certification really becomes valuable is for folks that work in the federally assisted contract world through the US DOT. So contracts for highway, for transit, aviation, airport concessions, anything that touches those. And now that can be a wide array of businesses. It can be contractors, subcontractors, engineers, manufacturers, project managers, consultants, people who supply uniforms, who supply, could directly office supplies, anyone that touches in that space where there could be a federal contract associated with it or an opportunity to subcontract can really take advantage of the DBE program. Now, where it differs is that DBE is associated with government-funded contracts. So if you want to go out there and you work with Amazon or some other mega company, you're really going to want more of your WBE or your WOSB certification. That is more applicable to the private industry. And you can have every certification you want to. You can have the whole alphabet soup. One doesn't preclude the other. So the DBE specifically is what we're here to talk to today because of the new regulations that have come out. And so first, to give a little bit more background and to start highlighting some of the changes, I want to talk about who is socially and economically disadvantaged. So there are some classes of individuals that are presumed to be socially and economically disadvantaged due to historical discrimination, particularly in the federal transit contracting world. So those individuals include women, Black Americans, Hispanic Americans, Native Americans, Asian Pacific Americans, and subcontinent Asian Americans. And please note that what is not included, and that I often get questions about, and I don't have the answer as to why, is individuals from Middle Eastern or North African backgrounds. They are not presumed to be disadvantaged under the regulations. And so there's the presumed, but there is a mechanism, and in the new regulations, it's made much more clear about how others may show an individualized showing of disadvantage. So this could be for folks from those backgrounds, Middle Eastern or North African, or perhaps folks with a disability, members of our LGBT community, that can show, a disadvantage because of, really who they are, an immutable characteristic, something that they don't control. And there is now a specific process in place to show that. And I'm not going to go through all those details today because there were a lot of changes that we're going to be talking about today. And, I'm trying to stick with ones that are more applicable to a general audience. But if people have specific questions, I'd be happy to talk to you later about those. So this new rule that we're talking about today, now who it affects. This new rule, it's final as of today. The DBE and ACDBE program have been around since the 80s. And if you think back to the 1980s, which, a lot of us here, I'm getting to be the age where I was a very small kid in 1982. But as you can imagine, it was a very tough world for women and minorities in the government contracting industry. Working on highway projects, it's probably pretty scarce to see individuals owning companies in that space. So this program was founded back then. And the update that goes live today, that is effective as of today, is the first substantial update since 2014. So it's been a long time. A lot of things have changed in the last 11 years. And the reason why these are also so exciting is we've been waiting for them. There's been the need for these changes for a long time. There's been a lot of pain points that have come up for a lot of folks that have these certifications or want to get these certifications. And their hands have been tied because the regulations just have not stood up with where things really are today. So the government issued the notice of proposed rulemaking back in the summer of 2022. So we're going back nearly 2 years ago. And when that happens in our government, when there's a notice of proposed rulemaking, it's put out there and it's open to public comment. And so anybody can go and comment on what they have proposed, the regulations they have proposed. And some of you might have done that. I know I posted several comments about concerns that I had with some of the proposed regulations. And those comment period that closed Halloween of 2022. So here we are, May of 2024, and we finally have the final rule. It goes into effect today, and it's modernizing and updating things. And why I'm very excited about it, besides the fact that, I just nerd out on this stuff generally, a lot more businesses are going to be able to apply that perhaps were excluded before due to personal net worth and other issues. And there's also, I think, that more businesses will be able to stay DBEs longer because of these changes. So that's really good for, again, equalizing the playing field, which I think everyone here today, I don't know that if you're on this call, you probably would not dispute that things are not an equal playing field in this space. So the first change that I want to talk about, and if I was really good with sound effects, I would have trumpets heralding this change, is an increase to the calculation of personal net worth. So when we talked about how the individual owners of the company that control have to be socially and economically disadvantaged, to prove the economic disadvantage, you have to submit a personal net worth form. So that lists all of the money that you have, all the assets that you hold. And previously, this cap was 1.32 million. And the only things that were excluded were your equity interest in your primary home and your ownership in the applicant business. Everything else was fair game. Retirement accounts, any investments, any other properties, your ownership in other businesses, that was all fair game. And the ceiling was only 1.32 million. So when you count a lot of that, it doesn't take a whole lot to get to 1.32 million, especially for an individual that owns a business of any, growing size. So effective today, the personal net worth cap is now 2.047 million. So that is a substantial increase. And they also put into effect a mechanism where they can increase this or theoretically decrease, but we're not likely to be in that kind of economic environment, that it can be changed every 3 years. And it can be changed based on a formula and processes that they set forth. And we're not in this situation as we were where the personal net worth hadn't changed since 2014. And here we are, 11 years later, and with inflation and the way the economy has evolved since then, it just wasn't a great number. And the other thing that actually results in even bigger increase the amount of assets that the disadvantaged owner can have is that they're excluding your retirement accounts. So that is huge. That was something that knocked out a lot of clients of mine that were, that call me up when they're getting near to the ceiling of personal net worth. Retirement accounts, so not counting them is also a huge increase here that allows more folks to participate in the program. There's also some changes as to how the contents of your home are counted. While this doesn't usually come into play too much because it's usually not the deciding factor whether or not you're hitting the maximum amounts. There are some regulations put in place. So if you have a spouse or domestic partner, it is very clear that the materials contained within the house are counted as 50% for you. And now what it is silent to is whether maybe you have a roommate that you are not in some sort of relationship with, how that would count. And the way I read it, it seems that 100% of what's in the house would count. But I think that's a bit of a gray area that we may see some decisions later on clarifying that. Another clarification was added about how motor vehicles are counted as ownership. So say maybe your spouse or maybe you collect, some sort of antique cars or something along those lines, or maybe you have some watercraft. And so those vehicles will be counted in the name of who they are titled and whom owns the title. So if you, the business owner, owns the title, it'll be counted in your name. If your spouse is the name on the title, it counts for them. If you're both, it'll be 50-50. And for those of you who have filled out a personal net worth form before, you may have noticed the box that asks about any money that you've transferred in the last 2 years. And so, they're looking at people who are, giving away money, maybe transferring to children or family members in a way to try to stay below the personal net worth limits. And so they have made some very specific explanations of what counts and what doesn't count under that. It's expected, you're going to have a wedding for your child, things that are customary like that. And so they're looking sort of for a value of $20,000 or more. They did enumerate that. So that is also new as to how they will look at those things. So overall, I think this is probably the thing that I'm most happy about for my clients and for business owners that want to have the certification, because there's been a lot of people that I've talked to that were just over the limit, but couldn't apply, or those that really wanted to stay in the program, but couldn't. And so I heard a lot. I have attended some of the events that the USDOT has hosted about these regulations. They've talked a lot about wealth creation and generational wealth creation. So the goal of the program is to create wealth for individuals who historically have not been, in the position to create wealth, to pass it down to future generations. Now, there should be new personal net worth forms. As with a lot of things that you'll hear about today, I don't think that the certifying agencies are ready for this. So I do expect some chaos. When I looked this morning, and actually over lunch, I checked again, I couldn't find any agencies that had new forms up. So TBD on that. Hopefully we should see those soon, but I do expect a little period of chaos here while they try to figure these things out. Another issue that I thought was important, because it comes into play a lot for many of my clients, is how they view loans to acquire ownership. Now, to be considered an owner under the DBE regulations, the disadvantaged individual has to have a substantial financial contribution to the company to have a stake in it. And so there have been some questions and a lot of issues that come up over the years about how loans are treated. So let's face it, a lot of folks who, if you're in a position where you're presumed disadvantaged, you're below that personal net worth limit, you're not in the position to just write out a check for several $100,000 to buy a share in business. And so you have to get a loan to do that. And so there have been various loans over the years that have come into question. So they have made a lot of attempts to sort of narrow that down and make it more clear. So first, they want to be crystal clear that things need to be in commercially reasonable terms. 0% interest, $1 a month for 1,000,000 years is not commercially reasonable. And you have to make regular payment. So having, suppose, like a 5-year loan that says, okay, as long as you pay it off by the end of the 5 years, it's fine. No, they're not okay with that because that's not commercially reasonable terms. They do want to see you making consistent payments. Now, another new and very important thing, because it could affect folks right now, is that at the time you apply, you must have paid 15% of the value of the shares in your business from your own funds. And so what this means is, say it's $100,000 was the cost to buy into this business. And so under these regulations, there's sort of two options. So you could have paid $15,000 or more cash down payment from your own assets towards that. Or if you had a loan, you had to have paid at least 15% off of that loan. So $15,000 of that loan, of the principal of that loan, by the time you submit the application. So they want to show that, like, you really have skin in the game. It's just not some loan. Particularly, they're concerned when they see loans from prior owners, from family members, those sorts of things are always called into question. When it's from a bank or other sort of commercial institution like that, it's usually going to be on commercially reasonable terms. So that's what they're looking for. There's also no sweetheart deals. So again, when you're having loans from perhaps people that the former business owners, again, you can't have this, okay, well, you pay $50 a month when you can, and then, you'll be good for it later. So you can't have that sort of setup. The applicant company cannot guarantee the loan that you are using to acquire your shares. So, if you are acquiring shares in ABC Corp can't then guarantee the loan for you, and they can't make loan payments for you as well. You have to be the one making the payments from your funds. I do expect that they will look at this closely. Something else that they are made explicit that wasn't previously is that the circumstance where there's loan forgiveness, where all or part of your loan is forgiven, well, then that reduces your capital contribution, your investment in the business by that amount. So say you have the $100,000 loan and $50,000 of it is forgiven. Well, then you will have only really paid $50,000 for your share in the business. So that is something that they wanted to make clear. So some other changes to how they look at ownership, and really the two themes of what they look at are ownership and control, and we'll talk about control in a couple minutes here. You need to maintain your investment in the company. So whatever money you put in to acquire your shares, you need to maintain that. You can't put it in and then the day after you get your certification, pull it back out. And so you can't do that. You can't withdraw or otherwise revoke the investment. And another interesting thing that wasn't in there before, so when another owner puts in cash, the CEDO must do so as well in a proportionate amount. So say it is a 51-49 split in ownership, two owners, and they both put in money to acquire, but there's need for capital in the company, and the 49% owner who is not considered a CEDO was like, yeah, you know what? I just got this cash I inherited from my grandma. I'll put another $100,000 in. Under this circumstance, that's not okay, because then the socially and economically disadvantaged owner that owns 51% isn't putting in that money. So it's the non-disadvantaged owner putting in the money, and that is not okay from their analysis. Another new change is more specific rules as to gifting of shares. We see this a lot in family businesses. I see it a lot where daughters are taking over dad's business, which is a wonderful thing. But gifting was always sort of problematic in the past. Different certifiers viewed it different ways, but now they're making very specific rules about how that is viewed. So when gifting occurs, gifting of shares in a business occurs, person making the gift must immediately cease being involved with the business. That means that, dad is giving daughter the business. Dad needs to go, sit on an island somewhere in the Bahamas and let daughter run the business. He can't stay there, as we often see, running around doing stuff, maintaining client relationships and that sort of thing. So the only way that they're supposed to stay involved in the business is if they are a lessor. So maybe they own the real estate and lease it to the business. That's okay. Or if they're just providing what is called, quote, standard support service, end quote. Now, I don't know what standard support service is interpreted to mean by the US DOT. So I do expect that to see some US DOT opinions come out on what exactly that means. Is this, dad comes in and does payroll once a week? Or is it, dad's there every day, filling out contracts? Where is the line? We don't know. This is a gray area that they created that we don't have anything to go on. The way we interpret a lot of these regulations will be based on, when there is an issue and individuals appeal it to the US DOT, the US DOT issues a written opinion. So that's where we're going to see a lot of interpretation of these regulations. And unfortunately, that's going to be a little ways down the road by the time it goes through that process. And also the US DOT does not move quickly in issuing those decisions. So this one's a little grayer. So if you're in that situation, you're going to want to be very careful. It's always preferable to the gifting person to get out entirely. It just makes things much cleaner. And one additional requirement is that the gifting must be reflected in a writing of some sort. There is another theme that we have seen in the revised regulations is allowing you to fix things. Previously you submitted the application and they're like, well, this is what it said on the application, so you can't change anything. And the US DOT is kind of like, look, for a lot of things that could be fixed by something easy, let it happen. It's going to make life easier for everyone because if you deny this business, they're going to come back, reapply in a year. You got to go through the whole process, and it's just a stupid technicality. And so one of those things that can be fixed retroactively here is if you were gifted the shares, you can reflect it in a writing afterwards, and that is okay. And I think overall that that is a good attitude that the USDOT is setting forth in the regulations because, I've dealt with certifying agencies all across the country. Some are wonderful, some are very antagonistic and difficult to deal with, and like to play a game of gotcha. So it's unfortunate, but I am pleased that that is the attitude that these regulations are taking. The changes to the analysis over control of the business. So, it is very important to these regulations that the CEDO have control, both legal and practical control over the business. And this is very important. And the reason that this is in place, and I know that this is a pain point for a lot of people improving this during the process, is that you get, some male who has owned this business, white males own this business for years, puts their wife in the CEO position, gives her all the titles and makes them, 51% or whatever percent. Meanwhile, I have seen this, the wife is spending 9 months of the year on the beach in Florida, comes in the office for lunch when she is in town, but isn't actually doing anything. So that's why it is to prevent those kind of folks from getting the certification that these rules are in place. So one of the things that folks should be aware of, and particularly I would think, the folks at WeBack East that are, advising folks to the small business center there, is that the company to apply needs to have some sort of business operations. They are clear that they cannot certify a business plan. You have to actually be doing something, not wanting to do something. And this is a little bit of a gray area again that leads a lot of discretion to the certifying agency. For instance, I have a client that is in this position now that they had the technical skills and abilities from their former jobs, but they don't have any contracts yet. And so, helping them apply, showing that yes, we get this contract, we can do it right away. This isn't like we're just trying to start this. We've never done it before. Maybe we were teachers and now we want to, pour concrete. You got to show that you have the ability. So that's somewhere, they changed that, and the goal of it was to reduce the burden on certifiers from certifying companies that really had no realistic chance of performing work as a DBE. But it also, kind of makes things hard to get off the ground for businesses that are starting out. And so another major change, which if anyone's been through this process, and I know that I have at least one client in this webinar that's been there, uh, historically, there's been a lot of focus on what do the other people in the business do? Not as much as on what the CEDO does, what the socially and economically disadvantaged individual does. What are the other people doing? Are they really controlling? So they've kind of flipped the narrative, or at least attempted to flip the narrative by making it clear that the CEDO has to show that they run the show. Buck stops with them. They're the ones that make the decisions. They're in charge. And they're very deliberate in saying that they want there to be less emphasis on what others in the business are doing. So I think I applaud that change because I've seen this with countless clients that, maybe they have family members in the business, or they just, happen to work with white men. And the certifiers will try to say that the white men are running the business, even when it really is the woman. And one thing that I always advise my clients, you're business owners, you're running a team, you want to be all about the team. There is no I in team except when it comes to DBE certification. Then there needs to be lots of I's in team, and it needs to be about you, the socially and economically disadvantaged individual, and what you do. Because it's when you're a leader, you want to praise other people and give them credit for things, but that there's no place for that in DBE. It needs to be about what you do, what you can do. And another change is, and this is probably of interest to folks, where there can be more than one CEDO in a business, as long there can be 10, there can be more, as long as at least 51% of the ownership is socially and economically disadvantaged, it can be a DBE. but they've stated that at least one CETO must have the overall understanding of the business and its essential operations sufficient to make sound managerial decisions, not primarily of an administrative nature. So honestly, they don't care about what you do in the office. Even though as a business owner, you need to do everything. You need to do payroll, maybe you need to do the accounting, you need to do the HR forms. They don't care about that. They want to see you making decisions about what projects to take, directions the company should go on, technical decisions about what equipment you need and don't need, what to do when there's a problem with the equipment or that you need a certain skill base and employee. So that's where they want to see information from you to show that you control the business. But I find it interesting that under these new regulations that it has to be at least one socially and economically disadvantaged individual. It doesn't have to be all of them. So that is a change. And I can see that being interesting in companies such as engineering companies, for instance, and maybe some other ones. And another change, and this is something that is, just judging from the sheer amount of people on this call have probably run into before, that they have, previously, when they looked at your operating agreement or your bylaws or anything like that, if they saw anything that required more than your consent for anything, you were done. You were toast. You had to redo it. But now they have allowed for what is, really common in, shareholders' rights, giving the non-CETOs the ability to have to consent for extraordinary actions. Someone who's a 25% business owner should have to, be able to have a voice if you're going to sell the company or totally change the product lines, the business that you're in. So under the new regulations, that is allowed. That also has become a problem historically too, when you have outside investors in the company that want to give you private equity investments, but hey, they've got to protect their rights too. So that is also a very welcome change. And again, trumpets should be heralding. They have totally revamped the interstate certification process. It is now essentially reciprocity. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, the interstate certification process is what you do to become certified after you are certified in your home state. So DBEs are certified by state. It's not a national certification. And I will say there were a lot of calls in the comments to the notice of proposed rulemaking for a national certification, but they weren't ready for that yet. And so the interstate process has always been a pain in the behind for the folks that do business outside of just their home state. I'm sure a lot of folks on this call do business in multiple states. Anyone over by Philly is definitely doing business in multiple states or wants to do business in multiple states. Or if you're over in Pittsburgh like me, Ohio, West Virginia, even New York is, relatively close by. So the whole process has been redone. You used to have to submit another copy of your application, and they would, take forever. I mean, it could take months and months and months. And that was a detriment when you would have, say a potential contract in another state that you wanted to bid on, but it was going to take you months to get the DBE certification under the interstate process. So now that is totally revamped, and that hopefully should not be a problem. So another acronym, we love our acronyms and regulations. It's called the JOC, the Jurisdiction of Certification. And within the regulations, this is replacing home state. I don't know why, but that's what they did. So that is, you're supposed to get certified first in the place where you have your principal place of business. And once you have gotten that certification, then you can submit for interstate certification in other states. And now to do that, it should be super simple. You have to have a cover letter saying, hey, I want to be certified in your state. And here's where I'm already certified. So you have to list all the states where you are certified. And you have to send a screenshot of your home state, your JOC certification in the directory there, proving that you are certified. And then you also have to submit a new DOE, which is a declaration of eligibility. We will talk about that on the next slide. Hold that because that's also going to be exciting to some folks. And so then after you submit that, the other states, the UCP there, and UCP is Unified Certification Program. Sorry for all the acronyms. They need to confirm that you are certified in your home state within 10 days, and then they must immediately certify you without further rigmarole and ridiculousness that some of you have probably run into. So 10 business days from when you submit your certification request for interstate, you should be certified or darn near certified. Now later, they can request a copy of your application from the original UCP. So not from you, but your home state JOC. And there, something you should be aware of, and it's a little convoluted of a process. I'm not going to go into it in detail here, but there is a new process for decertification when a company no longer qualifies for the DBE program. There is a new process when it happens interstate. And this process involves all states where the entity is certified being able to weigh in. But even more importantly, once you are decertified in one state, you are decertified in all. This is different. Some people could get decertified and then maybe keep their certification in other states. But it is done in one, done in all. And so, this is something to be aware of. I've had folks just say, you know what, forget it. I don't even want to do business in that state. I'm just going to walk away from it. But now you can't do that. So, if you are looking to apply anytime soon, please double check. The websites, none of the websites are updated for the new regulations. They still have interstate certification applications and affidavits up that are just false. They still have the personal worth statements that are false. So it's it's a bit of a hot mess there right now. All right, trumpets heralding again. The declaration of eligibility replaces that affidavit of no change. And so this is exciting for companies that are certified in more than one state as a DBE, because it is going to be a standardized due date. I have clients that might have certification in like 20 states. It's a big administrative hassle to do that because previously your yearly affidavit was due on your anniversary of certification in each of those states. So, and there's no mercy. If you miss the deadline, you're done. You're out, you're decertified. There is no wiggle room, no excuse. Your house could have exploded. You could have, had some sort of horrible disease. They don't care. There's no excuse for missing it. So making it standardized is really awesome. It's going to cut down on a lot of administrative burden for folks. And so that due date is going to be the date where you were first certified in your JOC in your home state. So the anniversary of that. So that should be easy to remember. And you send the same thing out to all the states where you are certified. And so they're also clear on what you need to provide with that, because we've seen from different certifying agencies that they like to demand a lot of different documents that perhaps they're not supposed to. Like, yearly personal net worth statements should not be required because the affidavit or the DOE here is going to say, that you certify that you haven't had any changes. So they are going to require your DOE, your declaration of eligibility, plus documentation of your company's gross receipts for the most recent fiscal year on a cash basis. So that is also a change that may affect some folks on how they do their taxes. So cash basis, not an accrual basis, but on a cash basis. And so they look at that. They want these gross receipts, proof of gross receipts, so they can see that you still meet the size eligibility for DBE certification being considered small. So there should be a new form out for this. Technically, it's supposed to be starting today. I have not been able to find one anywhere. I did some Googling, could not find one. Went to, but Pennsylvania sure doesn't have it. So I have not seen it yet. So those should be out very soon. And so if you are asked for a personal net worth statement along with that, they're not supposed to be doing that. And so that doesn't mean that they can't, open up a certification review for you and then ask for that. But as a matter of course, they should not be asking you for that. And so there are also some changes for folks out there who make any kind of product or sell products as opposed to services. There are some very important changes that may affect you. So there are 3 categories now enumerated in the regulations for folks who sell products. And the first one is manufacturer. And they made a very clear definition of what is and what is not a manufacturer, because I think that there was some confusion at times about what was manufacturer, what wasn't, what had to be done exactly. So the reason that this is important is that, for those of you who aren't in this world yet, and maybe are looking at it, these federal funded contracts have DBE goals for their contractors. And so the generals are trying to get subs to meet their goal requirement for DBE utilization. And so one of the ways they do that is buying goods. So for manufacturers, DBE manufacturers, the project can count 100% of the cost of goods and supplies that you sell them, including the transportation costs, towards their goal. So they love DBE manufacturers. So what is a manufacturer? They try to make it very clear. I'm sure there will still be some gray areas, but a manufacturer owns or leases as well as operates a facility or establishment. And that facility must house the production of materials, supplies, articles, or equipment required under the contract and of the general character described by the specifications. And the manufacturing includes the blending or modifying of raw materials or assembling components to create the product to meet contract specifications. So, okay, blending and manufacture and modifying raw materials, but assembling components, that seems a little gray. So here's what they said about what is not a manufacturer. So making a minor modification to the materials, supplies, articles, or equipment. And a minor modification, they defined as additional changes to an already manufactured product that are small in scope and add minimal value to the final product. Again, we don't know how small is small. What is minimal value? Is it, adding, screen printing a logo on a shirt? It's unclear. So TBD on that one, but they did make some attempt to clarify that. And so the second category is a regular dealer. And for a regular dealer, 60% of the goods and supplies, along with the transportation costs, can count towards the DBE project goal. And so a regular dealer, they've defined as an established business. Again, that established business, that's going back to what we talked about, is not just a business plan or I plan on doing this, I want to do this kind of work, this kind of business. It has to be established doing the work. Engaging as its principal business in its own name, not in another name, in the purchase and sale or lease of the products in question. At least 51% of the items under a purchase order or subcontract are provided from their inventory. So this is like a store, if you will, maybe selling construction supplies. So they have to have at least 51% come out of their own inventory. Any minor quantities delivered from other sources have to be of the same character as those provided from the DBE's inventory. So red bricks, if you're selling red bricks to a project and you need to get a little bit more from someone else, maybe you don't have enough to fulfill it, that's okay because they're going to be the same general character. It's going to be red bricks. But if you're selling red bricks and you then buy electrical supplies from another company, that's not of the same sort. So that's not gonna count. And there is a new class, and this is a distributor, essentially a drop shipper, if you will. I know this is, some folks do this as a business because especially starting out, you have less financial stake in it. You don't have to put as much capital to amass all your products. So this is a new category, and it will count for 40% of the value will count towards the goals. And a distributor is an established business engaging in the regular sale or lease of the items specified in the contract. You have to show ownership of the items in question. So that is really what the difference is here, to show that you really have these products, you have ownership of these products. So in order to do that, you have to assume all risk of loss or damage during transportation. And this should be evidenced in the purchase order or bill of lading from a third party. And it needs to say that, hey, once these leave, wherever they're shipping from, these are me, the DBE's responsibility, and I bear all risk of loss. Now, that is kind of contrary to what you as a business owner usually want, because you usually don't want to be responsible for what happens in shipping. But here, to count as a drop shipper, and to get that 40% contract value, you must show that. And so that is, terms that transfer liability to you at the delivery destination, that's not going to cut it. So, it's, that might be a problem for some folks, but this does open the door for folks who can't keep an inventory in hand. Maybe they don't have the space, maybe they can't afford the space, but they can do this. So it does open up some additional opportunities. And we're kind of winding up, and this is, I can't see the chat. I can see there's 43 questions in the chat, so we'll try to get through some of those. We should have plenty of time. But one of the last major points I wanted to touch upon, when I talked about the heralding trumpets, this would be one where I'd have the sad trombone, womp womp, because they replaced what was already a problematic regulation with something that, in my view, is even more problematic. So some of you may be familiar with the concept of the ability to accumulate substantial wealth. This was part of the regulations that are no more as of today. And the AASW was an analysis that they would perform when you were in a circumstance where someone was technically under the personal net worth limits, but maybe they weren't really economically disadvantaged. Maybe they lived in a $4 million home. Maybe their spouse had substantial wealth that they clearly had access to. There was an enumerated list of 6 things that were suggested to be considered, such as AGI. The AGI listed had been 350. And I know that was problematic for a lot of folks. So that's always been problematic. There's always been a ton of discretion given to the certifying agencies, and there was a lot of problems with that. And so the rule that was proposed was this reasonable person standard. Would a reasonable person consider this individual to be disadvantaged? That's it. That's all we got. We don't have any enumerated factors. Everything is fair game with no exceptions. So your retirement funds, they don't count towards your PNW, but they can count here. The value of your home, the ownership in your business, your adjusted gross income, et cetera, et cetera. When this rule was proposed, it was universally panned in the comments, both by DBEs, folks like me, I made comments, and the certifying agencies themselves are like, no, we don't want this. We want something that we can, apply more objectively, because this is so subjective. There's an opportunity for abuse. There is an opportunity for personal biases to come into play. And unfortunately, I have seen biases against certain ethnic backgrounds happen with these business owners of certain ethnic backgrounds are more likely in certain areas, in certain states, to have to undergo this analysis to try to decertify them. Unfortunately, in the final regulations, the US DOT said, too bad. We think you can figure it out. So this is my, I don't mean to end on a downer, but it was the logical place to put it, where this is just not great. And we're not going to have a whole lot to go on until the US DOT issues some guidance in those appeal decisions that, we won't see for probably 9 months to a year. And so this is an area where I anticipate getting some calls in the next few years. So overall, I think the updates are fantastic. I think that they alleviate a lot of the problems that my clients have come into. Yeah, they create some new problems too. So I guess we got to take the good with the bad. But before we get to the chat, I just wanted my contact information is here. So please connect with me. I would love to talk with you, to learn more about your business. If you need help, need assistance, follow me on LinkedIn because I blog on these topics. I've been blogging for many years, but most recently I've been blogging at least twice a week on these topics, on the new regulations. So please find me on LinkedIn and connect. And I also started a YouTube channel where I am recording some videos on the same topics, just kind of getting that off the ground. So if you ever watch YouTube, appreciate the follow. So thank you all. Colleen, have you been watching the questions?
I have. We have had a very lively discussion in the Q&A here. Most of the questions about WBE and reciprocity I've been getting to, but there are quite a lot of questions here, particularly from people that are in the process now. I know we've got one person here that asked, they're currently certified in one state. Do they now need to apply for the DBE through the US DOT, through another state? Should they wait for this new reciprocity to go into effect? What do we do here?
Sure. So if you're currently certified in the state where you do business, you don't have to change anything. If you are looking to do business in another state, you do have to go through the process in the other state. And to be clear, the US DOT doesn't do any of the certifying themselves. It's all through the state agencies. And here in Pennsylvania, you have SEPTA out in Philly, you have PennDOT, you have in Pittsburgh, you have Allegheny County, and blanking on the other one in Pittsburgh, the airport authority, I think. So, you have to apply through those folks. So if you do want to get certified in another state, unless you need it immediately, I would say just cool your jets for a few weeks to let them figure things out, because I'm sure it's total utter chaos right now with them trying to figure out what's going on. If you have an application that is in process, which it sounds like maybe somebody might have had that sort of issue, it will be, the new regulations will be applied. As of today, any decisions moving forward has to be under the new regulations. There's no consideration, but the best term for it is there's no grandfathering. I don't like to use that term, but I'm not sure of a good alternative. There's no grandfathering in of anybody or anything. There's no real way for that to happen. That's not going to happen. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, so for all of you, I know there's a lot of you in the chat that are asking, because you guys are either in process or have one state's DBE. Yeah, hang on for a few weeks, because as Danielle said, it's going into effect literally today. So there are a lot of questions that we can't necessarily answer right now. We just have to see how things shake out.
Yeah.
All right, let's see what else I got. I'm trying to scroll through. There are a lot of questions and conversations in the chat. Let's see. More renewals. Here's an interesting one. A food brand that is a manufacturer but uses a co-packer. Are they technically a manufacturer?
So they use a co-packer. So if you're making it from raw materials and you use another company to do part of it, I would assume and this is my best guess, because again, we don't know, that they're probably gonna look at, what percentage of the cost of production is that amounting to? How big of a deal of it is, or you just, basically just subbing something out? That is a very good question that I don't know the answer to. That's my best guess as to how they would look at it, based on other things that I've seen them go through with the analyses.
Great question. Um, let's see, are personal taxes required to be submitted with the DOE in addition to company taxes?
No, no. And Victoria, I see that's you. No, they are not supposed to be. It's just supposed to be proof of the gross receipts. So if you were asked for that, that is improper. However, you always run into this situation where, you want to cooperate because you don't want to get on their bad side. But that really is not something that they should be asking for, because your DOE should, whenever we see the actual new forms come out, should say, I certify that I still meet the personal net worth requirements.
How about home-based businesses? Are there any restrictions about if you run your business from your home?
No, nothing particular to your home. I think especially now, post-COVID, so many of us are at home. I'm at home full-time now. And that's something that they also accounted for that I didn't mention, but the on-site interviews that have been occurring really post-COVID, mostly virtual, those are here to stay. And that's also a good thing too for construction, manufacturing, from a safety perspective. You don't have some random person wandering around your place of operation. So that's going to stay, as well as virtual appeal hearings.
Good to know. Any chance that they will raise the amount of money a DBE can make?
I'm assuming they mean the gross revenues. That is controlled by the SBA's small, there's two numbers. There's what the SBA considers small for your NAICS code. And then there is the gross revenue max for the DBE. And to be honest, I don't remember if there is a similar mechanism now. I think there is. I think that has actually been in place, a mechanism to raise that without having to go through the rulemaking process. I believe that was just recently raised not that long ago. So, however, I would expect that to continue to be raised on a regular basis, much like the personal net worth will be.
Yeah, we do get those updated numbers. I feel like on a fairly regular basis, they're updating the caps. Let's see. Is there a listing of all certifying agencies by state? I'm assuming this question regards to DBE. I know for the WBE, for WeBank, there's 14 regions, 14 regional offices. In order to go WeBank, you have to go through one of those. For the DBE, I know in Pennsylvania, there are, I think, five or six that you listed, agencies, PennDOT, SEPTA, Philly Airport, Allegheny County. I'm sure it's similar in other states, correct?
Yes, I'm not aware of one national list of here's all the certifying agencies. So it's if you go from state to state, if you go to the state UCP website, if you Google, Iowa UCP, it'll tell you who you can certify through in Iowa. Because every state is going to have a particular agency or division known as the Unified Certification Program, UCP, because that's required for them under the regulations.
Yeah, I remember maybe about a year or two ago, a WBE that was looking into just making a general list of all the states and where you can get certified and the reciprocity with WeBank. And it's just the moment that list is complete, it's already out of date because things are just constantly changing, especially these days. Let's see. What if you are currently certified in numerous states? Several are currently due for annual renewal. Not our home state. Do I need to renew them or wait until my home state is due in a few months? Sounds like this is going to be maybe a sit and wait kind of scenario.
If you have a renewal due, always do the renewal. They did say there's going to be a little bit of overlap. As the sort of when you're going by the annual anniversary, you might have to do one now and like right now, but then you might not have to do it for a while. So you do still need to be doing that. If there's not a form on the website, call them or email them, reach out, ask what they want you to do, because you do not want to be put in a position that you did not submit anything, because you will be automatically decertified, no hearing, no must, no flush, and you won't be able to reapply for a year. So you don't want that.
Good question. Here's another good question. Can a CEDO, did I say that correctly? SEDO?
Yes.
CEDO?
Yes.
Work outside of the business? There used to be a reference to not being able to work more than 10 hours in the business. I know for the WBE, there's no limit to working other jobs or outside the business. For the WOSB, you do have to be working full-time in your business without another full-time job. What about for DBE?
So for DBE, they actually took that part of the regulation out. And I think it's really now just part of the whole judgment call as to whether or not you can control, because working in another business was not prohibited. It just couldn't interfere with your ability to control that job and your ability to control the DBE. And so we'd see that, I've had clients where, maybe, 10 hours a week they work for their husband's got a different business. They go and, run payroll and help out there, but that doesn't interfere with the business. So it's all going to be looked at from that perspective. How much are you doing? What are you doing? Is that taking away from your job? For the DBE, are the hours you're working, if you're working 9 to 5 in another job and you're trying to run a construction company, something in the construction company where the work's going on the daylight, you can't be doing both jobs at once. So that's the kind of analysis that they would be looking at. But there's no hard and fast rule about X amount of hours.
Let's see, if you're a single member LLC and your company taxes are on a Schedule C on a personal return, shouldn't they only ask for the Schedule C? I know for WeBank, you do need to send the first 2 pages because that's your actual tax return, plus the Schedule C it's an additional schedule. So you do need the actual return plus the C. Is it for the same for the DBE?
Yeah, well, and you know what, you don't have to. So the gross revenue doesn't have to be shown always by your tax return. There are other financial documents within your company that you could use to show that. So, we can talk to your accountant about what else you can do if you don't want to show that. And you can always redact things, like if your spouse's salary is on there, you can redact it, can redact their social security numbers, anything like that. But I know there's always different little annoying issues that come up whenever you are, passing through the taxes like that.
Question. Let's see, will there have to be a new personal net worth statement every few years? Is that going to be a requirement for recertifying?
Yeah, it's not a requirement. They can, they are supposed to, reevaluate things a little bit every few years. So I don't know that it's not a hard and fast requirement, but they shouldn't be asking for it every single year. Absolutely not every single year with your DOE, but I would expect that you might have to, do it every few years. And I think that that's reasonable, because there are folks out there that lie, unfortunately.
Yeah. That's a great question. Any advice on what a reasonable person would consider as not being financially disadvantaged?
Your guess is as good as mine, because it is just absurd. With, who is the reasonable person? Are you talking about a reasonable person, and a reasonable person where too? Because, what a reasonable person in Arkansas considers to be financially disadvantaged versus what a reasonable person in New York City or San Diego considers to be financially disadvantaged, or to not be wealthy. That's gonna be very different things. So we don't know. One thing that, things that they have historically looked at in this analysis is they like to use the term, the obvious trappings of wealth. So, having a horse farm, having like some big yachts and different things like that. I don't know where that's going to go, because again, it's so subjective, which is why I hated it so much when I saw it. I was so annoyed whenever I saw this was the final rule, because it is entirely subjective, because you have government employees who, by nature of being a government employee, are generally not making that much money. So what they consider reasonable versus what a business owner considers reasonable may vary quite a bit. So that is an area that I am not happy about, and I don't know what's going to happen. Unfortunately, I do anticipate hearing from a lot of businesses going through problems in that area.
Yeah, definitely. Question about reporting a suspected WBE where the husband is running the business. I know many agencies have a challenge process. WeBank does as well, where you contact the local regional office. So if they're certified in Pennsylvania, Delaware, South Jersey, you'd contact me and my office. But just keep in mind also that every single WBE gets a one-on-one interview with the woman owner. And, you know, I know from my experience, I've seen a number of people trying to challenge a WBE status because they always see, you know, a husband-wife team and the husband's out in the field doing sales. So they only see him. But that's all he does is sales. She does everything else. She runs all the other operations. You just don't see her as much. And usually I ask, you know, if it was flipped, if it was vice versa, and you only see the woman, you know, would you assume that the man, it's, you know, the man's the one running the show? I just say, like, we do have that challenge process. Absolutely. We do want to look into any suspected scenarios. But there is a reason that WeBank is the gold standard of certifications, is because it is very rigorous, and we do these interviews every 3 years to really ensure that the woman is actively involved in and making decisions. So if there are any concerns, feel free to reach out to me or to any other officers that you worked with for like the DBE, or of course Danielle would probably give great advice as well.
Yeah, I mean, DBE has a whole process. I'm actually going through that right now in another state for a client that this client is actually a white male-owned client, but one of their competitors is a woman-owned business, and she does own the business, but she is not disadvantaged by any means. They have found millions of dollars of holdings just in public records. So I'm able to raise that, and my client does not need to be revealed because I'm the one raising it, so they can stay confidential because it's me, and I don't care if my name's associated with it because this is what I do. So if you do run into that circumstance, there are things that you can do, and you don't have to, you can stay behind the scenes.
Great. Well, one more question. I know there's a couple specifically about states. I just want to just throw out there for those of you, I apologize. There is a fire truck outside my window. For those of you that are asking about registering with your home state, just with your WBE, keep in mind that when you register with your WBE in a state, that is for doing business with that state government contracting. So when you register with the state of Pennsylvania for their small diverse business program, that is for contracting with the state. That is not necessarily for doing business in transportation, which is what DBE is, and it's not for doing business with corporations and work, you know, in the private sector in Pennsylvania. So just keep that in mind, that it may not be worth your time to register with a whole bunch of different states if you're not going to be pursuing that state's contracting directly. I did throw a great article into the chat a little bit earlier. I will put it in again right now, that I think will be very helpful for everyone with questions about registering with different states. So we have time. I'm going to take one more question. If the DBE wants to remove themselves from an out-of-state DBE program, does that remove them entirely across the board from all of the state's DBEs?
No, it shouldn't, because you're voluntarily relinquishing it. And you're not having it taken away that you no longer qualify, you know, I mean, and that makes sense. Maybe you made a business decision no longer to do business in Florida, for example. And so you don't want to be having to, you know, deal with them all the time. So you're saying you should be able to relinquish it. That's not a problem. I mean, that's voluntary, that's not forced. And also I wanted to say that I did put my contact information in the chat, putting link to my LinkedIn, to my YouTube, to my email, my phone number. To connect. Please feel free to connect. I love working with women-owned businesses. That brings me joy.
Well, thank you so much, Danielle. This was a excellent and very much needed program. I hope all you on the call have learned a lot. Stay tuned. I'm sure that we will hear more as the chaos emerges. But know that, you know, we are here as a small business center. We have a lot of great people like Danielle that we can refer you to if you do run into any issues. And we will be sending out this recording and the slides before if not this afternoon, then before, you know, we leave for the weekend tomorrow. So thank you guys so much for joining us, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, everybody.